Well, in episode 632 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network, I'm Hilton, and today is a special day for the Barcelona podcast. It is our first recording on Big Up for a live podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube or listening after the fact, we thank you so much for doing that. But a huge thank you to the people that joined us live on Big Up for the show. And for this occasion, I have with me today Neal Gardner. Neal, you came on the Barcelona podcast originally when you were just a humble tweeter a few years ago. You were just getting started, and today you've returned as a full-blown, can I call you an influencer now? Is that where you are, an influencer on social media or on all things Barcelona? So thanks for coming back either way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I remember I came here a long time ago. I think it's been about 4 years now, 3 or 4 years. Very different time on social media, really. So yeah, next time won't be so long, is what I'll say, because I do watch your podcast, and I do like it very much. Some of the people you have on very like-minded. So yeah, I just hope I can contribute the same way.
So today, again, we had the live chat, so we're going to have some fun talking transfers. But first, we do have to kind of go over the boring stuff. And as much as the fun transfer stuff about what's possible and if it's possible and all that stuff, sure, we have to talk about numbers and money first. So I do apologize to everybody about that. But let's talk about the Nike deal. Because without the Nike deal, no transfers could be done in January anyway. And more likely, transfers will be difficult in the summertime. So here's what we're talking about here. There's a 10-year extension with Nike that seems to be official, fixed annual revenue with $100 million per season. The deal is through the 2037-38 season, so that's now 13, 14 years from now, starting with this year's budget, the 2024-25 budget. It's reported that it will be a $40 million increase in fixed income and a bonus of $100 million spread over 14 years, which actually isn't that much as far as just a $40 million bump. Fixed income starting in the 2027-28 season will be $110 million per year. So it's an extra $10 million bump 2 years from now. It still does need approval from the club assembly, but that's almost an afterthought at this point. I don't see any reason why it would not pass with majority there. The focus of this deal seems to be global distribution of Barcelona merchandise. Now, you're in Australia, I'm in the US, and you and I both know that over the last forever, that getting certain items from the Barcelona store is basically impossible. I'd ordered one of the things from, I had it shipped to somebody in Spain, and then he shipped it to me. Shout out Emil, for friend of the show, just because, there are certain items in Barcelona merchandise that just have to be ordered in-house in Catalonia. So since that 2016 agreement, the club has been ramping up the retail operations to the global audience. But as we know, the pandemic did slow supply chains and kind of threw them all sideways in a way that has taken years to resolve. So Barca licensing and merchandising, that is BLM, was reported at $110 million last season. Now, there are questions on how will Nike work with BLM to co-brand different collections, product variety, advertising campaigns, etc. We don't have details, but that's what they say is going to happen. They're also looking for better pricing on merchandise by better using Nike's existing manufacturers, better utilizing Nike's e-commerce potential for a global reach. My only question with that, what was stopping them from doing that now, right? Why are they kind of going back to the well on that? And then the last thing here is that, I guess, a positive on why this deal took so long. Nike, as much as them feeling like they could call the shots here, Nike is dealing with competition from Adidas and Puma in football, the same way that they're dealing with Under Armour and Reebok in the NBA. And I actually think that's kind of helped out everybody. So this deal is a lot more than just Barcelona coming out with a new jersey every year and fans saying, hey, that's ugly, or that's, you know what I mean? Like, I love that jersey. That's great swag and all that stuff. So I know I talked a lot there, but I wanted to set the scene for what the Nike deal was. So Neal, what is your perception of the Nike deal moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. I am far from most well versed in the finances in general, but I do think it's interesting that it is quite a long-term deal. So I think short-term, the cash injection as well with the bonuses will help us as well with the debts, the wage bill, whatever it is. But in the long term, I'm curious to see if it catches on and how good it actually is. Talking about 5, 6, 7 years from now. And another interesting thing to me is a lot of the things this board has done so far have seemed to be very much focused in the short term, right? That makes sense. Pulling those levers, getting the deals done, getting the cash injection in right now. I suppose that sort of borrowed money aspect, if it gives you the flexibility to do things now to make the side stronger, and then sort of kick the can down the road, but hopefully kick it down the road where you're in a better position to deal with it. So that seems to be the strategy in a way for now. And I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's one of those things that you just have to kind of see how it goes, how the sporting results stack up. And if we can compensate with the squad we build, the trophies, the money we generate as well with the new camp now coming in. So I think that's sort of a philosophy or strategy with everything the board's been doing to well, when we kick the can down the road, it's viewed in a negative way, and I think a lot of people have the tendency to, you're putting off your problems. But I'm not sure what the other solution could have been in this situation, because you've got to realize, I talk about this a lot, but Barcelona, a new president comes in, you're talking about immediate success if you want to come back in, if you want to solidify your legacy or your reign, right? You're not gonna build sustainably for someone else to come down the road and take the credit. So what Laporta is doing, I think it has a rationale behind it, and I think the Nike deal falls into the same category when you talk about the sort of short term focus, but then trying to build things long term as well. So yeah, I think it's one of those we're just going to have to see down the line. That's kind of my perspective right now. I don't want to say something out of turn and then not be well versed in the finances. I have read a few threads on X now, and I've seen what a few people have said. From my side, it's just kind of figuring out how everything stacks up and sort of links in a way with the levers and the Nike deal. And what I see is this short-termish cash injection philosophy, and then kicking the can down the road. But it kind of does make sense in its own right.
Yeah, my kind of agreement with the Nike thing, regardless of what you think of the jerseys and all those details, is that this Nike is a company that, as far as the emphasis on global distribution, right? There are certain clubs now in the world, right? Manchester United's been that way for a while. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Liverpool would love to be pushing in there. I mean, maybe Bayern Munich even. The global reach of these manufacturers, only so many companies can really handle global distribution. If that's really the emphasis, which is probably what Barcelona should be. Again, this is now rarefied air for the clubs we're actually talking about that need that. So going in-house, I think for Barcelona was always going to be not even a risk, but I think they were going to be leaving a lot of money on the table, right? And then even looking at the other places of distribution, whether it was Adidas and Puma. So like if Nike wound up having the best deal and you already had that relationship with them, you kind of, it sounds to me like both sides, again, Nike's dealing with so much other competition that it sounds like in negotiations, that was what it was, that both Nike and Barcelona were coming at it from a position of power in a sense, but they also weren't, right? Like Barcelona knows that Nike can make a lot of money because they're one of the powers of world football, and it helps them continue to have a hold on, some of the global football brands. Like France is another one of their big ones. So they don't want to lose out to these other places. So Nike lose a little of their leverage. Barcelona, of course, is losing some of their leverage because where else are they going to go, right? The deal's already with Nike. So I could see how these negotiations took so long, right? And the last part here, and then we're going to talk transfers, I promise. So the downside, I think, that people are already seeing is unrelated to Nike itself, but has to do with the salary limit that you were talking about. So because negotiations have been going on for this year, and it was to bring Barcelona to the salary limit, so they can make sure at least that Olmo and Pau Victor are registered in January, because at the moment, right now, Barcelona would not be hitting that salary limit. As I said, I wouldn't get too excited about hitting to the 1-1. Maybe they can at least register Olmo and Pau Victor and keep the squad intact the way it is. But getting excited about the 1-1 may not work, because this is a report from Relevo. They said that the 40 million from the signing bonus that I just talked about, that helps. So the 40 million signing bonus, but it does not get Barcelona out of the negative because of the lack of payment of those Barca Vision asset sales. So 55 million of the 200 million that was due has been received. And obviously you've been seeing the reports. The club is pivoting from Libero and Beneficia to Emirac, Aramark. There you go. To Aramark for payment. So the 145 million short on that money that was supposed to come in is still what is missing. The report continued, though, that the final 60 million installment, that is what is due for this accounting year. So that 145 million that the club was short, that has already been accounted for as losses in previous seasons. On the other installments, it did not come. So again, 60 million is the salary limit that the club seems to be short. So with the 40 million of the Nike deal on that signing bonus that is coming in, that means that Barcelona are still 20 million away from the 1-1. So that seems to be the number that Relevel has reported, which I don't know if we can believe that truly, but that seems to be the number. So the good news is, though, this is more good news. The club, when they set up their budget and the league approved that budget for the salary limit, the club only budgeted to make the knockout round of the Champions League. So reaching the quarterfinals or anything beyond that, that would wind up then being additional income that can then be added on top of the salary limit. Plus, as I've been saying, every chance I get, that the return to the Camp Nou will also very much just help the finances. Like getting back in the Camp Nou, and now it seems like, they originally promised November, December, and you and I both had said the same stuff that, hey, probably whatever they promise, because of construction in Spain and construction worldwide, always expected to be 2 to 3 to 4 months later. So now we're looking at February. And it seems like based on where they are now in construction, February is real. So they go back in February and all that stuff. So basically, Neal, all is that to say that instead of promising January transfers and really focusing on that, I think a lot of what we're about to talk about has to do with the summer, because it seems like by the summer, Barcelona will finally be returned to the 1-1. Nike deal will be done. They'll move back to the Camp Nou. And finally, after years, you and I can just say, all right, let's have some fun. Let's talk about transfers, because it seems like we're finally back to a good spot.
I know, talk about transfers realistically, because, for the past few years, it's been fantasy over fantasy, and we know we haven't been able to do most of these deals that we're talking about and thinking about and hypothesizing about. But now, from next summer, we can finally start to realistically see where this squad goes. Because I do, I've always said with La Masia, with the young players coming through, we do have a great base to build upon. And the prospect as well with how the side's playing under Flick, the prospect of what we can do and how we can add on this, I think is going to be very, very exciting for Barcelona fans all over the world. So, looking forward to realistically now talking about some transfers and where this squad is going.
Yeah, all right. So it's finally that time. We finally got to it. So I'm basically going to throw names out, and we're going to go one at a time. We'll see how long it takes. I think the name we start with is Joshua Kimmich. It is the international break, so his name is really circulating pretty quickly. Well, I want to say, too, Dev Isaac, the thoughts on the Lyon situation, we're going to get to that. So that's coming later. So Joshua Kimmich, he makes 20 million annually, and things are on the rocks at Bayern Munich because they don't want to pay that number either. I've kind of said before that I think if the club didn't find a way and Flick didn't push like crazy over the summer for, Kimmich to try to push his way out of Bayern and bring him in that way, I just don't think it'll happen now because, we were hours away from having just watched Marc Casado with the Spanish national team. I just don't see, because even if he takes a pay cut to get to Barca and he's making 13 million instead of 20, it just doesn't make sense to me to bring in Kimmich.
Yeah, no, I agree. I probably would have given you a different answer before Casado broke through the way he has, but people make the comparisons between Kimmich and Casado. They aren't exactly the same. Of course, they have different tendencies, but in terms of what they can do on the pitch, the tenacity, also the technicality of the ball, the ability to play it right back as well. We've seen Casado do that a few times. I don't think Kimmich is worth it unless Barcelona sort of think of getting rid of Frankie de Jong and cashing out on him and then sort of trying to get a deep line playmaker's profile. But then when you have Barnell coming back from injury as well, from his ACL injury, you have Casado, you have Pedri, hopefully Gavi stays fit. I just don't see the need to go out and splash 13, 20 mil on wages as well, which has been our main problem on a Kimmich who's aging as well. His value isn't going to increase with time; it's going to come down. So I think sustainability comes into it, and the more wise approach would be to continue building sustainably with youngsters and protecting their resale value as well. If things go wrong with someone like Casado, which I hope they don't, there's always the potential that you can sell them on, or at least you're not spending tens of millions on wages a year. So In that regard, I just don't see the need for Kimmich now. Maybe like before Costa, it would have been a different answer, like I said. But now, I think we just stick with what we have, and the midfield realistically is our strongest point of concern at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I've been profiling other La Masia products too, and I'll tell you that there's 2 or 3 others in the next 3 or 4 years also on the way, right? So, I mean, even if Bernal comes back at 80%, you bleed him in, and it seems like there's too many young double pivots at Barcelona right now at the moment, but the level that they play on the field is a level that they are. And if that makes, I know it sounds very, it's simplifying it too much, but if Bernal is good enough, he's playing. If Costa is good enough, he's playing. If Gavi is healthy enough, he's playing because he's good enough. If Pedri is healthy enough, he's playing because he's good enough. And depends on where they put them all. Dev Isaac also said, if Frankie is leaving, I'd rather we activate the buyback on Nico Gonzalez, which I think is 30 million or 40 million. I mean, that's an option. I don't know if he's would of the level. I think Costa's already hit a higher level than Nico Gonzalez was at his time at Barcelona, but that's a good shout. All right, let's head up top to the center forward position here. Jonathan David at Lyon said to The Athletic, this week, Barcelona was always a team I grew up supporting. When you grow up supporting a team, it's your dream to play for them. The 24-year-old for Lyon has 13 goals, 19 appearances so far this season. That's a goal every 112 minutes. He is valued at 45 million euros, but he will be a free agent in June. So Barcelona would be getting him on a free transfer is what it looks like. He wants to come to Barcelona. And I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Jonathan David. There you go, Neal.
So this is interesting. I will say I don't see him being like our go-to man long term. The striker we sort of rely upon to replace Lewandowski. However, having said that, I also think there is a place for him, especially the free agent, because Barcelona, we're in this weird limbo now with Lewandowski where last season I was convinced that, okay, he's gone now. He's going to be gone next season. He isn't good enough anymore, and we just move on, and we clearly have to make sure we find a long-term striker. But given the way he's playing, I assume he's still going to be here and be our first choice next season as well. Vitor Roque, you have the deal with Betis over there. We don't know how that's going on. He might. I think they have an option to buy as well, so they could trigger that because he's playing so well at the moment. And I think the loan deal's for 2 years as well, so it's unlikely that he'll be back next year. I think someone like Jonathan David is a very good option, not as a stopgap, but someone who can come in, do the job, handy, reliable. We can't expect a 38-year-old, 37-year-old Lewandowski to start every game, every week. And also with Lewandowski, we don't know how he's going to be next season because at that age, I talk about it all the time. At that age, you don't know how a striker is going to age. They can look great 1 month, next month it just goes all downhill. So that consistency, it's about the body, right? You can't trust your body when you're 37, 38. So Jonathan David, he is a proven goal scorer. He scores goals week in and week out almost. He averages a goal every 2 games for Lyon. So I think he is someone that we can rely on, the right age profile. And like I said, if things don't go well, it could be a Kessie deal where you just sell him on for a profit. Might not be a huge profit, but you don't have any real downsides because his wages aren't astronomical either. So I do see a place for it. I think it could be something we can entertain, especially if we try and break the bank on a different position, let's say a left winger instead of a striker. So you come in, you take the year, you sign someone like Jonathan David, and then you see how things are in 2026 and maybe then go big for a striker. And I'm sure we'll talk about those names as well. But that's kind of how I see it at the moment.
Yeah, that's the big picture. And you mentioned Vitor Roque there. He has 5 goals so far this season. So with Real Betis, I don't know if people are really watching that, but like if he hits double-digit goals, a reminder that he's still a teenager. Or he maybe just turned 20, whatever it is. But he's still a super young striker who came from Brazil all the way to Europe. Both Deco has admitted, and we kind of said it last year too, that the club kind of forced him to come over early because they wanted him, right? And then it didn't work out, and he had some trouble. But now it seems like just a few months later, he's hit the ground running at Real Betis. So I think people threw him out a little too quickly about his future. Like he was bought for big money. But again, if he's hitting double digit, now what did Barcelona spend total for him? Was it 35 mil plus? incentives, right?
Yeah, with add-ons.
With
Yeah.
add-ons, yeah. So 35 million
Yeah.
plus add-ons for a player that is 20 years old next season and scoring potentially in double digits with Real Betis this year. That's absolutely fine. Like that's where he's supposed to be in his
Yeah.
progression, right? And Barcelona do not often buy young strikers. Like striker is a position that they bring in from an experienced player that already knows how to score somewhere between 16 and 25 goals a season, or if they're very lucky with Robert Lewandowski, you're hitting 30, or actually Luis Suarez, one of the greatest strikers of a generation, he's hitting 30, things like that. So I think the other two names that we have to mention here is Victor Gyokeres, the striker for Sporting Lisbon. His starting price would be 60 to 70 million. And as you mentioned, that timeline, he would probably only come if Lewandowski leaves. But why would he leave next summer for Lewandowski? I mean, the way that he's scoring this season. And I also think when I see a striker in the Portuguese leagues for Sporting CP, I go, why would a Premier League club not go big for, like, why would he stay a whole nother year at Sporting Lisbon? Why would Barcelona, to your point from the left wing thing, go after him for 60 or 70 million now? I just think there's going to be competition for him. Because then the other name I'll throw at you, if you're going to wait a whole nother year, is Erling Haaland just Laporta's white whale? That's what it feels like too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, building on your point about Roque, I think he's great. Honestly, I probably scouted him more than any other player before. And it just seems so bizarre to me how he came in, right? And okay, he's not ready, he needs time to adapt, don't play him, that's fine. But the way we started to discard him, almost look for a sale at times, it didn't make sense to me because it's not like he played and he flopped. He'd been here for 6 months, and with Australia coming from a side where it's a completely different environment. You know, they don't have the ball. You have to learn different movements. You have to learn how to play with different players. It's a possessional game at Barcelona. So it was always going to take time for him to adapt. And when he played, you know, he looked fine. He looked good. We saw signs of promise. And for them to try and sell him and move him on and kind of, you know, not know what to do with him just didn't make sense to me. Because when you're signing a 19-year-old striker from, let's say, Brazil, you have to be in it for at least the medium term. You can't be like, you know, after 6 months, you're out, mate. That doesn't work. It's like Madrid going with Endrick now that he hasn't been playing regularly. Okay, well, didn't work out. Goodbye. That's just not how you sign developmentally. So I think he's very capable, and I think he's more capable than a lot of strikers we're going to be talking about, at least potential-wise, or in terms of his profile as well. And then moving on to the lad from Sporting, you know, he doesn't strike me as one of my favourite candidates at the moment because it's not as simplistic as saying, okay, he's 26, 27, and he's never played in a big league, quote unquote. You know, he's never played in one of the top 5 leagues or top 4 leagues. And that's not to say he can't perform in those leagues, but it is a bigger risk when you're signing someone you know doesn't have the sustainable sample size at this age, especially because you talk about someone like Samu, who's at Porto and I campaigned for him. I said, okay, he can be a good developmental option as well for Barcelona. But the difference is he's 20 years old and he's already played in La Liga. We've seen what he's capable of against certain opposition that we are going to come against. But with Gyokeres, it's just not the same thing. And I do have concerns about the fact that my biggest concern, especially, is he seems to thrive on space. So when there's space in behind, he's absolutely devastating. You know, his link-up play is great, very strong, agile, moves fast. But I haven't seen the same sort of domination from inside the box. And I think at Barcelona, it's very important that we have a striker that can dominate the box. Lewandowski isn't the same player he was 5 years ago. He isn't as dominant on the box now, but you still see those movements, his poacher's instincts, how good he is in the air. With Gyokeres, we don't see the same thing because he's just so used to playing in a different environment, also in a side that where he can basically do whatever he wants in a way. I remember we saw this with Gakpo when he was at PSV. The guy would do whatever he wanted to, you know. It just doesn't translate the same way because the levels are different. So you never know how they're going to play. And an isolated hat-trick against City in the Champions League, as impressive as it is for, you know, his stock, and I'm sure he's going to earn a lot of money for what he's doing in the Champions League, just isn't the same thing. You need a sustainable sample size. So also for the concerns you mentioned, I think he isn't my first choice, and I don't think it's realistic that he'd end up at Barcelona anyways, because 2 years from now, I think he's probably going to be in the Premier League, most likely.
Yeah. Let's actually we're gonna go over to the chat for a little bit because there's other names I have for you, but I didn't have Trent Alexander-Arnold on my list. But Badri asking Neal, do you think that we will be trying to get Trent? He also said at the club he likes the most after Liverpool is Barcelona, especially if Trent Alexander-Arnold it would be coming on a free.
Yeah, I'm probably biased in this, but I think Trent has the potential to be, one of the greatest right backs, at least of the modern times. And I've spoken about this on Twitter as well. I think if Laporta wants a superstar free agent signing, I think Trent could be that guy for us because, firstly, Lamine and Trent on the same flank, from a production point of view, from a chance creation point of view, that is the most productive, devastating flank dynamic, I think, in the world. And Trent also gives you that support where I believe personally that Lamine is going to shift inwards a bit like Messi did, of course, to a different level, but he is best used as an inverted sort of right winger where he can play close at goal because his scoring potential is off the charts as well. But with Koundé, of course, I think he's developed into one of the most complete right backs himself, but you still notice in some of those instances where he can't provide that support going forward, and we do lack a bit of production on the right. So I think, Jules Koundé used to be, he was the best centre-back in the league before he moved to Barcelona. The plan was always to play him at centre-back. I think you can sort of use him as a CB-RB hybrid with Trent as well. So when you need to defend, when you need to play a game state with adversity, you have Koundé in there. But when against most of the Liga sides, really, you can afford to have Trent in there, just pinging balls across, working off Lamine, and it would be goals galore, more than it already is. So if there's a chance we can get there, because the second thing is I don't want him going to Madrid because I think that would hurt us because Madrid are probably it's Barcelona, Liverpool, and Madrid. I think would be the most realistic places he ends up at. And for a player that good, I think he's just going to take off in La Liga as well. So he'd be my first free agent if I had to pick to sign any free agent from 2025. I'm very high on Trent, and I think we can make it work. Because especially if we get rid of Christensen, as the reports have come out, you have Koundé, Araujo, Kovacic, and Nico as your centre backs, right? That's a solid four, and then you work with Trent and Koundé as your right backs, and then you have depth, you have versatility, and you have tactical flexibility in the back line. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would wonder about that is that he would come in with the expectation to be a starter, and Koundé is the starter, and Koundé and Lamine Yamal, that partnership has improved to the point where I don't want to kind of underrate what is already there in Koundé, and then Hector Fort is kind of developing. It's more the left back spot that I would be more concerned about in terms of depth and backup and Balde and all those things. And then the other thing with Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, somebody was saying, like, as you mentioned, like you wouldn't want to see him at Real Madrid, but when it comes to Barcelona, Real Madrid, with Carvajal doing in his ACL, I mean, Carvajal, not only was he good with the Euros, but he started the year as one of Real Madrid's best players. Like a lot of their results this season came on the back of his late leadership in games, as usually is the case. So as much as I dislike Sergio Carvajal, as much as I don't like him, he was one of the best players for Real Madrid this season. And without him, they just look a different side, right? I think Fede Valverde kind of admitted about the Clásico, kind of not getting punched in the mouth. And we're seeing that they could really, that being Real Madrid, use a high quality right back. And we don't know. He is in his 30s. And I can tell you when you're in your 30s, you just don't know. When you're coming back from injuries, you don't know how it's going to work. And so if Carvajal doesn't, if there's no forward, there's way back forward for him to reach his top level again, they're going to obviously be going hard for a right back. So that would be a concern. People are asking about left wing. And I think you and I are on the same page that Barcelona are looking for wingers for that. And when we talk about, we were speaking about Haaland, right? And these white whales and the big names and all those things. And that still seems like an ounce of fantasy. What doesn't feel like fantasy is Barcelona spending 70 million on a left winger. That feels what's real, right? So the names that are obviously being looked at are some of the top left wingers in world football, which is Rafael Leão, Nico Williams. They remain topics both inside the club, it seems like, with the board, and then outside. And then obviously Ansu Fati getting hurt again. When we're talking about him, his wages might say, starting left winger, but that's not where he seems to be in the future. So I've talked a lot about Ansu. We don't need to talk about Ansu here. But when it comes to Rafael Leão and Nico Williams, Neal, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one because I was a huge advocate of the Nico Williams deal in this summer, especially after Euros. I thought he'd be a great signing, and I still think if we signed him, he'd come in. I think he'd be great. People talk about how his production isn't the same for Athletic this year. Well, it's completely different environments. Barcelona Athletic a great side, but you come into this system, you play alongside great players. I mean, Yamal, who he has a great connection with him to Spain, Rafinha, who can play in the middle, Dani Olmo, Pedri. I think it just changes the landscape of what he's capable of, and stylistically projecting into the future, I think he has all the traits we want from our left winger. But at the same time, I think Rafael Leão is the kind of player who can transform a side single-handedly, pretty much. He is one of the most unique left wingers right now. 6'2", 6'1", beats his man for fun. It's been a while since I've seen someone breeze past their man so effectively and so easily. So this is a big claim, but I truly believe he's the kind of player that you'd be talking about in Ballon d'Or conversations in a few years from now. He is 25, so it's the perfect age, and he'd probably be my choice over Nico Williams. I think I'd be happy with both of them, but Leão, he gives you. So the best way I can describe it is from a technical point of view. Nico can carry a flank single-handedly. We know he can do that. He is a high-volume dribbler, but Leão's physicality is on a different level. The way he goes past, his pace and power, that PNP is on a different level. When Nico Williams starts running, right, he has the acceleration to go past pretty much anyone, but he doesn't keep going the same way as Leão does. Once Leão is past you, he's past you. You're not catching up to him. And those finite details, they do make the difference at the highest level. I think Leão just has that little bit more about him in a lot of different facets. And if we are going to spend huge amounts of money on a player, 70 million, 80 million, I think there's no one better to do it in world football now than Leão, especially as the left winger. So yeah, I'd go with Leão and then Nico Williams after.
I'm with you because the way that I judge wingers, and it's what I say about Lamine Yamal and why I think he is the most informed winger in world football at the moment. Well, yes, I know he's hurt for like 2 weeks, but anyway, throughout this start of this season, Lamine Yamal has been to me the best winger in world football because in his worst games, when he's not finding the game, the floor that he gives you from game to game changes the game still, right? At least Lamine Yamal, even on his worst day, there's 3 to 4 moments I'm writing in my notes while I'm doing the watch alongs here on Big Up that he's affecting a game. And I think with Nico Williams and Leão, like watching the two of them, that is why I would pick if the difference is 50 million for Nico or 70 million for Rafael Leão, if Barcelona's really going to spend on one big signing and then reinforce in other spots, I think you go on for Rafael Leão for all the reasons you said. Plus, again, my belief that when I watch him, the floor is just higher, and especially if he's playing with Lamine Yamal and Lewandowski, and now you're adding the talent of Pedri to him and Olmo and right all that space. I just think what he would give you in 1v1 situations is high enough. My concern, though, is kind of what I had said on the actually the reason why you're on the show is because you and I got in touch after I had gone on Dom's show and voted because I didn't put Leão in my team. I instead decided to upgrade financially. You can go over and watch that on Domagoj and Barca Football Live, their page. But the reason why I not say am afraid to spend 70 million on Leão is because I'm afraid at the moment to get rid of Rafinha from Hansi Flick's system. It's just, you know what I mean? Like if Leão comes in, where does Rafinha go? I just think Rafinha's defensive acumen, like it makes it all happen. The high line works because of Rafinha's work rate on that left side, helping Balde, fortifying that. So my concern would be if you have Leão on your left side, are you going to ask of him enough to be, is he going to be defending well enough? But yeah, no,
well,
if you have a but, please.
I don't have a but. I think what you're saying makes complete sense. But I do have a but, apparently. I do think we'd see a change in how the attack is set up. So now you have Rafinha, he's more central. Olmo Olmo and Pedri sort of associate in between the lines, and often it's Lamine Yamal who's out wide. If we sign Leão, I think Rafinha and Olmo would be competing for different reasons. Of course, they give you very different things, but we've seen Rafinha play centrally, and he is a very big difference maker. Olmo gives you the technicality between the lines, that's different. But I think we'd see Nico Williams out wide carrying basically that entire flank. Balade would have a more realistic role because now we expect Balade to carry the entire flank. And I think that is the problem with how he plays and also how he's perceived because he isn't a Jordi Alba. He isn't going to overlap all day. But if we had Leão, that would change completely. And then we'd have Lamine Yamal, I believe, in a more impactful position, more central, coming in with more freedom. So that dynamic to me makes more sense because it gives you more avenues to head start. Right now, the other day, Lamine Yamal was injured and we found Barcelona struggling with no wide threat. Rafinha isn't the same player. Olmo isn't a wide threat. Leão is probably one of the most devastating wide threats in the world. So even without Lamine Yamal, God forbid, he's 17, 18, he needs rest as well. We have a player who can give you dynamism, who can give you solutions, who can unlock the block, go past players like Lamine Yamal does. But Leão is a more natural wide threat, and I think that is his best position, staying out wide, causing havoc basically in isolated 1v1 situations. And I do believe, like you said, Rafinha's role right now is very, very important. He comes in from the left, but he is playing fundamentally centrally. We see him move in and out. We see him with a freer role, and that has changed a lot. So I think in that dynamic, Rafinha and Olmo, and we know Olmo's fitness. It's so unpredictable, right? You never know. He could give you 20 games a season. He could give you 15. You don't know. He's not going to give you 60 games a season. So that's my main point for Leão. But I also see the other argument. We're doing great with Rafinha right now as well. So it is a difficult one because if you don't sign Leão, then you can sort of look at other positions as well, which we will get to. But for me, I think Leão probably is my go-to big money signing as Laporta wants to make this summer.
All right. Well, you convinced me. Yeah, Rafinha has a place in the squad, and it's probably a good idea for Barcelona to sign Rafael Leão if they can. So I think you get compelling argument. I'm not going to say no to Rafael Leão. How about that? Let's put it that way. Okay, so we're going to dip our toe because the next thing to do, we're going to talk a little bit about youth players, and then we're going to talk about the Lyon situation, which people are really asking about. So the two Argentine teenagers that you were high on, Neal, is Franco Masantuano of River Plate, a number 10, and Matias Acevedo, a left winger at Racing Club in Argentina. So the other name that I have also thrown out there, I did a YouTube short on him, Gilberto Mora, a 16-year-old, just turned 16 in October, by the way, so recently 16-year-old winger, an attacking midfielder for Tijuana in Mexico, has made 12 appearances, picked up a goal and an assist, was linked to a potential trial at Barcelona. Whenever we're talking about young players, like teenagers from other clubs, in the past, I would have said, well, it's probably not going to happen or things like that. But the club seems to also be investing in that way. That's why they went after Noah Darvic. Like, my only wonder is that because those players are already kind of playing for their first teams, as like Mora's already making appearances for Tijuana's first team. He's also, because of South America, his parents would have to, make the move and give approval for him to even go on the trial and all those different things. So there's still hurdles there, but it's also like, if I'm 16 years old and I'm playing first team football in Mexico, the other thing I'm adding to Mora too, to throw water on that, Mexican clubs are always willing to overpay for Mexican players, and they often do not pay their own Mexican talent. Like Liga MX has a whole issue about bringing forward their own players. That's why Mexico, I think, in general, is struggling to export players to Europe right now. They're also struggling to bring up young Mexican talent in their own league because they're willing to pay for other bigger South American talents that are then blocking their own Mexican talent at youth level. So having a youth player for a Mexican team, I think Tijuana will do everything they can in the next few years to keep hold of him and to overpay him, if anything. But you never know, right? If the player's ambitions are to leave, they're to leave, and Barcelona's a great spot for him. And then, for the two Argentines, I'm going to give you the runway there to talk about those two, because whenever you see the Argentine talents, again, bring in another player as a teenager that you're going to spend big on. It's tough, but I don't know. You've watched them more than I have.
Yeah, so these are two players I've been watching recently. Franco, I've been watching for a long time now, and he's another 10. I think he's great. He's one of those old school tens. He reminds me a bit of like, the Totti kind of school. Really old school, classic number 10. And he is touted to be one of the top 2, 3 talents in Argentina. Madrid have been after him for a while as well, being linked to big Premier League players. But then, you never know how legitimate these links are with young players, agents playing up, most highly touted prospects are linked with the biggest clubs. And now he's been linked to Barcelona as well. I think yesterday or day before, mightily, of course. But I think he fits in perfectly. He could be a great alternative to Dani Olmo, especially as I said, Dani Olmo is a bit unreliable. But when I do think about how much it cost, which is in the 40 million mark, I don't know if that's probably the investment we should be making right now, especially when you have Fermin Lopez at a 10 as well. You have Rafinha who can play centrally. But I will say, if we do sign him, I will be extremely excited because he does have potential to go right to the top. And it is going to be a bit of a risk. And I am concerned with Barcelona's youth strategy because we've seen when you spend 30, 40 million on a player, even if they're 16, 17, I think there's an expectation from the club that they start delivering immediately, like we saw with Roque. And I don't know how realistic that is, especially with kids coming in from Argentina or South America, or basically anywhere in the world apart from La Masia. You're not going to get immediate production. So I would hope whoever the next prospect is we sign, big money prospect, we do have a bit of patience with them and we give them the time to develop because, like I keep going back on this, but the way we manage Roque wasn't acceptable. And I think that sets a bad standard as well for people trying to move to Barcelona, for youngsters trying to move. You look at how this kid was outcasted pretty much immediately after not performing for a few months. I think that isn't the direction you want to go in. And then with Acevedo, I was like, oh, mate, he is special. Left winger, high volume dribbler, carries the flank single handedly. People draw comparisons to Eden Hazard, so very low centre of gravity, and extremely agile. I've seen him complete 9, 10, 11, 12 dribbles per game. And he is breaking into the first team as well now. So that, I think, is a more viable sign because first he wouldn't cost as much. And secondly, that is a profile or a player we need more. Yeah. So, you could get him in as a vice threat. If, let's say, they don't want to go for Leão, they can't spend 80 million, let's say, or 70 million. You want to go down the developmental route, then I think you start looking at these young prospects who can come in who have a higher ceiling, but who also fit the bill. What I will say about Argentine prospects is I was also very high on Gianluca Prestiani, who went to Benfica. He was touted to be a huge prospect as well. Same kind of player, left winger, high volume dribbler, and it just didn't work out. So there's always that sort of high risk, high reward thing with these kind of deals. And as much as I love signing prospects, I think it's as much as I love scouting prospects and hypothesizing about how they fit in certain environments, you never really know how it's going to go. And especially when you're talking about a club who does have a precarious financial situation, or at least is coming out of, a critical condition, you need to start making signings that you think are going to be as foolproof as possible. No signing is 100% foolproof, but you need to have a bit of assurance, I think. So I think it is compelling. What I will say is I like what we're doing with the African market. I like that we're going into different regions where talents aren't as hyped up, but they're still very, very highly regarded. And we've seen so many players come out of Africa in recent years. So I do like that we're stepping into that market, knowing that it is high reward, but the risk is a bit lower because you're not paying 30, 40 million for these players. You're paying 5, 10 million, and that is very reasonable. I can't talk about too much, but I do know people within Barcelona as well who say that they are very much focusing on those low risk, high reward kind of deals, which sort of leads me to believe that we are going to sort of try and capitalize on maybe the African and Asian markets as well, and North America as well. So I think we're going to gravitate away from South America and move toward these sort of less hyped up markets, which could be interesting. I think that's a great strategy as well.
Yeah, that's already started. I want to add a few things to it. We're seeing in the chat too that Stop Making Sense added that Fermin Lopez I did a whole YouTube video a few weeks ago during the last international break about that number 10 position. And so whenever I see Barcelona linked with a right winger or a number 10 position, I kind of say, Barcelona in the academy, especially for young talents, they do not need those positions. Like I promise you that between Guy Fernandez, Tony Fernandez, and do you mention getting in the African market, Ibrahim Diarra, who's going to be signing in January when he's 18. He's a right winger. Aziz Issa is also a right winger. So to your point, they are tapping into other markets for cheaper numbers. Even the left back spot, I think Oduro immediately signed and became the top prospect for Barcelona at the left back position. So those are positions that are being fortified. When I look down in the academy, and again, Noah Darvic is like third or fourth on that depth chart, just even in the number 10 position at Barcelona's academy coming through. Because again, you have Olmo, you have Fermin Lopez, Pablo Torre is still at the club scoring goals.
Yeah.
And again, then you have Guy Fernandez, who they're looking to get him time. And then Noah Darvic is technically like fifth on that list. I mean, no other club at a number 10 spot has that kind of that. I mean, even Liverpool is able to throw guys into the Carabao Cup and their future prospects of the level of Noah Darvic. But Noah Darvic, I mean, he can't even sniff the first team because of all the number 10s that are in front of him. And again, Tony Fernandez, the idea that Esteval wasn't brought in, like Tony Fernandez, of what we've seen of him and what the club thinks of him, I think you go, wait a second, maybe they didn't need Esteval at all because Tony Fernandez exists. So any right winger or cam that's a teenager, I don't know if that's necessary. But as far as left winger, there's really just Danny Rodriguez, and he's 20, and I'm not really sure what his ceiling is. He's also often injured. So as somebody said, to that Danny Olmo point, he's injury prone, not unreliable. Like when he's healthy, he's good, but he's injury prone. And when you're 18 to 21, you're constantly getting injured. That affects your development because Danny Olmo didn't really get hurt that much at Dino Zagreb when he was like developing, right? He's been hurt as like a full professional. So that would be my concern. Like down there, like the next left winger that I talk about in the academy is Ruslan Mba. And he's like, what is he, 14 right now? Or he might have turned 15, right? So it's like, we're not worrying, right? Like I'm not worrying about him. He's years away, right? But in theory should be years away. Like Lamine was 16. Yeah. Cobra say like the La Masia has broken my mind as how we talk about 16, 17-year-olds the last few years. But the point is, left winger is a spot that there isn't that much depth in the academy. So I totally understand that. But again, any cam or right winger, I go, the La Masia has that covered. Don't worry about that.
No, and also for me, I think Tony Fernandez is, if he was playing in Brazil or something, we'd be talking about him being worth 40, 50, 60 million because he's that good.
100%.
He is so good, man. Honestly, when I saw him preseason as well, and I think he is going to break into the first team. It's sooner rather than later because the versatility he gives you play on the right as a backup lean to play the 10 in place of Olmo, also sort of as a false 9 or centrally. He's just so good, and we saw that he's good enough in preseason as well. So I think it's only a matter of time. Maybe next season he breaks into the first team. And also talking about prospects, it's funny. Every year people talk about Barcelona. There's someone broken through, whether it's Gavi, Valdes, Lamine. And I find myself telling people, these are exceptions. They're not the norms. You can't expect it to happen every year. And then every year it goes and happens again. So I have to start reassessing in my own mind, what is the norm here? Because this isn't normal. It shouldn't be happening. But every year, this year was Bernal. Before the injury, man, he was looking like he's been in Southern Pro for years. And that turn of position like DM. La Masia has done some credit. And Kubasi as well, 17 years old, one of the best centre-backs in Europe. And then you have two DMs, Bernal, much younger, Costa in his first pro season. And these players, they're not just playing at the level of La Liga, they're playing like world beaters right now. And they've just come through the academy straight into the first team. With Kubasi, we had major defensive problems, and he came in and the 16, 17-year-old kid, he steadies the ship. It's Ronald Araujo who's looking erratic and unreliable, and this kid comes in and he gives you the calm, he gives you the ball playing. So my limits with La Masia at this point, if a 15-year-old makes his debut, I'm like, well, that's La Masia for you. Yeah. I don't know where it stops anymore. So they definitely have redefined the norm. At the same time, we can't be looking. I think Casado is a great example of the opposite being true. 21-year-old comes into the first team for Barcelona standards. That is old, but he comes in And nobody really has expectations from Costa because everyone's talking about Bernal. Bernal starts the first few games, or the first game at least. And then Casado just comes in and he breaks through. Last year it was Fermin Lopez, who was playing in the third division as a 20-year-old, and he comes in and breaks through and scores. I think he scored the most goals for a Barcelona midfielder since, I think, Cesc, was it, a decade ago? So there are both sides of the coin. First is you can have 15, 16, 17-year-olds or 16, 17-year-olds coming in and performing. But that's also not to say if there is a 20-year-old, someone like Danny Rodriguez, 19-year-old, that's not to say that it's too late for him. That's not to say he can't make the jump up and start performing in the first team as well. So it is a double-sided coin. And I think that's great that there is no discrimination. You know, you're not just completely disregarded if you're 20 or 21. And your performances really do speak for how well you can do in the first team. And I think that's the greatest part that La Masia, that meritocracy is well and truly there, and age doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's also generational too. Like the reason why La Masia talents didn't break through in the Carlos Alenia generations and that time in between from 2000 and really that 2011, because once Montoya, Bartra, and Christian Teo, like that kind of era, right? There was a few opportunities at the end of the bench for those kids with the top talents of Xavi and Messi and Iniesta doing their thing, right? And then Eto'o up top, whatever. So then there was that period in the middle where it was difficult not only for talents to break in because of who was already there, but also, I mean, take Thiago Alcantara as an example, and then after him. But it also was that those talents, again, I've been covering La Masia for 15 years now, 20 years now. I can tell you that group, the Costa group, just didn't have the same potential that the ones right now do. So I know it's not normal, but it also might become normal again when the guys that we're talking about, maybe the 7 or 8, 10 players that we're talking about in the academy, they do get to the first team and then they block other talents, or they are the next group of talents just may not be at the same level, right? And that's okay. And it is what is happening right now with this generation, to your point, is not normal. It's not normal to have, I can name 10 players from the ages of 16 to 20 that are absolutely ready for FC Barcelona's first team. And they're a top 6 side in the Champions League and leading La Liga. That is not normal. Completely agree with you. And, you know, that's why I'm just soaking in. I'm saying this is a beautiful, wonderful generation that we can't, we just can't, we couldn't have predicted just how good they were because they've hit everyone. When I watched Bernal when he was 15, they've hit on every single one of these talents, which like, and even the Fernandez cousins, I figured I had to pick one because there was like, what were the odds of them both really having the high potential they do? But they already do. Can we do Lyon or?
Yeah, well, the last thing I'd say is that I also think maybe there's sort of, it is true when a side is established and when there are less pathways to break through, you see sort of a dip in talent and potential. And I wonder also if that permeates through the academies. You know, we don't have the prospect of breaking into the first team right now, and that sort of lowers the level maybe on the psychological playing field as well, because there is a link between openings for the first team and the sort of talent that's being produced. There is a perceptual aspect to it as well, where we as fans maybe perceive talents differently when the first team is stacked versus when we need someone to come through. But you know, the numbers speak for themselves with guys like Lamine, Gavi, Balde, Koulibaly. So yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how La Masia is managed if and when Barcelona get back to being financially stable, have a stable squad, have a stable core. What's the production line going to look like? Are we still going to call upon La Masia the same way? Are we going to go back to signing commercially? Are we going to go back to those, hopefully not the Griezmann, Coutinho, Dembele kind of deals? That's probably the worst thing you can do. But I think the real test is, how do you use La Masia as a resource when you don't necessarily need La Masia in terms of filling up those numbers, in terms of having a squad to play with? So that's probably my main, not concern, but intrigue for the future.
Yeah. Okay. So we will do Lyon. We just have 2 questions for you first that I want to hit here. Joseph asked, and you don't have to go into detail as to why, but he would ask if they miss out on the other strikers that we've already mentioned here, Isak or Osimhen, if you had to pick between one of the 2.
Oh, that is tough. That is tough because With Osimhen, I think it's so weird how he's been sort of outcast. With Lyon, with Napoli, their president is a bit of a wild one. So, but I'd say Isak. I think he has experience in the league, very technical, very complete. I think he has more about his game from a well-rounded perspective than Osimhen in terms of his associative play and also how he scores. But with Osimhen, I think he's just that pace and power, getting in behind, dominating the box. I think that is a very big aspect. The last name I'll throw in, this is actually my favourite striker, and that's Benjamin Sesko. I think Sesko has everything, ball striking, pace, power, the ability to dominate the box, the movement. So I would say my favourites would be first Sesko, and then maybe someone like Isak, and of course Haaland is the dream. And yeah, that's probably the way I'd have it if I could pick, of course.
Yeah. My only worry about Isak is he's 25 now over the course of his career. The goal output has been up and down, right? I think the level of his consistency, and again, I talk about what he adds to a game. I think Isak is just a more well-rounded, talented player, right? So he would, I think, fit the system. But I think, it's one of those cases where I'd worry about him at Barcelona because he could impact the game with his hold-up play. He could, he associates really well and players can play off him. But if he goes 5 games without a goal, even though he's made the team better, what happens at Barcelona when your striker's not scoring goals, right? That's expectation. So that would be my concern about Isak.
Yeah, no, I agree. Same. I think as well at L'Oreal, he wasn't the most consistent goal scorer, but he was always a great player. So I think it just comes down to what you want from a striker. Do you want him to link up the play, or do you want him to just score goals like Lewandowski's doing right now? So yeah, it just depends. But they're both good choices. You can't go wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do Lyon now, and then we have one more. I've got like 2 more questions at the end. So let's talk Lyon. As I said, American businessman John Textor, best known for being the former executive chairman of Fubo TV and being heavily involved in VR, not VAR, VR production in Hollywood. That's virtual reality. He bought a 77% stake in Lyon in December of 2022, and after a recent audit of their finances, they've been given a provisional relegation to Ligue 2, plus a transfer ban. So they have until the end of the season to fix their financial situation, or hey, it's deuces to Ligue 1. Big clubs in France are struggling, though. This is a theme, not a Lyon were naughty, because Bordeaux was sent from the 2nd division to the 4th division, losing their professional status. That happened in July. Sochaux was sent from the 2nd tier to the 3rd tier in 2023, and Nancy won their appeal 2 seasons ago to remain in the 3rd division. Those names, and you heard, I just said 2nd, 4th division, 3rd division, those 3 are arguably the top. I mean, they're in the list of top 20 biggest clubs historically in France, if you look at like most years in Ligue 1. So Texter could still make the numbers work by selling his 45% stake in Crystal Palace. But, as a big, rich American businessman, he has to decide whether it makes more sense to basically have Lyon, slip to the 2nd division, have to worry about that, and then continue to make money on Crystal Palace in the way that he does in Premier League. So instead of really talking about the Lyon situation, people care about this as a transfer way. So the 2 biggest names that are probably on the way out, no matter what, because again, in January, they're just going to be trying to make money. And Texas basically said, if we have to sell players, we'll try to bring in new ones, which does confirm that in January, to make this all work and stay in Liga, it does make sense to part with, and you look up and down their squad. I recommend people just look at their squad. They've got a lot of players to sell. They do have like a talented squad that they've got some good deals over the recent years. That's why they're top 4 right now or 5 in Liga. So, but the 2 biggest names are Malik Fofana, a 19-year-old Belgian winger, and Ryan Cherki, a 21-year-old right winger. Can play attacking midfielder, but he's a right winger. They have a bunch of other names, I said too, a lot of under 25 promising players, and then also a lot of established vets that I think still could help teams as well. So Lacazette, that kind of thing, that kind of player. But yeah, Cherki and Fofana seem to be the 2 big names that will be departing in January.
Well, I think they're both great for base. If you can get them at the right price, they're both highly talented. But, in terms of Barcelona, I think Cherki, he will probably play more in the middle. So if he was to come in, if Barcelona made a move, he is 2-footed, so there's that aspect. But I haven't really seen him play on the left, but he is perfectly 2-footed. He's one of the most ambidextrous players right now in Europe. So he is someone I wouldn't mind going for if the price is right. But at the same time, I think about it from his perspective. I think you want to go somewhere where minutes are guaranteed, where you can sort of make a name for yourself. Because Cherky's been a prospect for the longest time. People have been touting him to be one of the most hyped up players for 3, 4, 5 years now. But he hasn't quite had that breakthrough season where you're like, okay, this is the guy we're going to go and spend 50, 60, 70 million on. So I think a move for him where he can get the eyeballs on him, but also guarantee playing time would be the most realistic option. So I don't think Barcelona would probably entertain that as well with the amount of with Lamine Yamal there and Rafinha and Dani Olmo, like we said. We don't need those sort of 8-10 hybrids as well with the Fernandez brothers as well. But Malik Fofana, like we were talking about those left wingers that we need, the wide threat, I think he could be a very interesting option because he is a proper winger. He is electric. He beats his man for fun, and highly talented, young. And like I was saying with the Argentine kid, he is someone we could get on the cheap. He could fill in that void we lack at the moment. And I think he'd probably be more willing as well to sort of take up that developmental role because Barcelona is a huge club. And it is a prospect where I think the difference between him and Cherky is he has a clear pathway in terms of Barcelona lacking a left winger or a wide threat, and Cherky doesn't have a clear pathway the same way. And if we're talking about numbers like 10, 15, 20 million, I think you're not going to get many more talented prospects who are already playing at a high level. He's already playing for Lyon. He's already starting week in, week out. He made his debut for Belgium as well, played a great game.
Yep.
So I do think that he would be my first pick from the Lyon flash sale, if you will. And I do think there's potential that he does break into the first team, if not as a starter, at least as a very valuable profile that can come in and fill that wide threat void that we currently lack. So yeah, he'd be my first choice. It's probably my only realistic choice from Lyon at the moment.
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish we disagreed more, but we don't. I completely agree with you as well. From what I've seen of him, I think he fits a need, and the price point at the moment I think would be 15 to 20. But again, I think that flash sale for Cherky and Fofana, the timeline just not going to fit Barcelona. I built a Nike deal so that we could talk about kind of throw water on January stuff. For that very reason. So let's see. The only thing that I have left here is you've also mentioned Ayoub Boyadi, 17-year-old. For Lyon, who is an attacking midfielder, and then as well as Alberto Moreno was also mentioned. But as I just talked about, I'm not saying that I want to not have you talk about those guys, but they're attacking midfielders. And my issue with Moreno for a while now has been exactly what I've been saying, that he's probably going to be 15 to 25 mil, but which is actually good value for him. I think if Barcelona signed him and he wants to come for 15 million, that's actually really good value for the player that he's becoming. But my concern is that there's just too many at that position.
Well, I will say one more player that I have been talking about is Yerome Hernandez, who plays for Depor right now in the second tier. He is a very high volume dribbler. I think he completed 11 dribbles one game. Can play on both flanks. I think he could be a very, very good low option signing for us, a low cost signing for us because. Again, like I said, he's kind of like the profile of Brian Zaragoza in a way. I don't think his ceiling is astronomically high because he's already in his 20s, so he's not going to go much ahead. But in terms of a utility profile who can be very low cost, we're talking 5, 7, 6 million. I think he could be a good option for Barcelona and who could most certainly contribute as well in the long term. So more than those guys, I think I'd be going for the right profiles because, at the moment, attacking midfield is 10. We just don't need it. Like, probably the last position we need at the moment. So I'd be looking at fast, high volume left wingers who can probably maybe even play on both flanks as well because, we need that rest for Lamine Yamal. So, yeah, anyone who fits Malik Fofana, Yerome Hernandez. And there's one more kid from Malaga I think we were linked to. I haven't watched him much, but it said that we might be bringing him in, 17-year-old. I'm forgetting his name now. That was linked from Malaga,
Yeah, once I remember that name, I might actually do a profile on that player as well. Yeah, now you have me looking him up. Because what is he? He's that kid's real young though. He's only like 17 or something.
Yeah. I have watched him.
Antonio Cordero. That's what it is.
Antonio Cordero. Yeah. I have watched him, and he strikes me. He's very direct. So he's almost like he's closer to Ansu Fati than he is to like a wide threat. So I
Mhm.
think he is a good player, but that's not quite the profile we need in terms of being the right coach. So that's my only concern with him. But, if you're talking about 17-year-old who's already starting games in Spain at that age, for Malaga as well in second tier, it is a deal worth doing, but it's going to be a different kind of profile. I'd probably have like someone like Malik Fofana ahead of him, like way ahead of him, of course. But
Yeah.
in terms of the profile as well as the signing.
Yeah, Cordero is 3 goals, 3 assists, and just 12 appearances so far with Malaga's first team. Again, 18-year-old, a little bit taller. Stop making sense of saying he's going to Real Madrid, which I believe that. Maybe it's just the hair. He just has that Real Madrid hair. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying. Okay, we're going to do goalies, and then we're going to do a last question, then we're going to be out of here. So Diogo Costa, 45 million at Porto. Alvaro Valles, 27-year-old Las Palmas keeper. Contract expires in June after he renewed last January. Lucas Chevalier of Lyon has also been mentioned. He is only 23. So I have said, and again, I said this on Domagoy's show, that I think Barcelona, even with Ter Stegen, I know ACLs are just fine, but I do think that even at his age, at 31, it might already be time to bring in that, again, this is not a disrespect to Inaki Pena, but as far as like just another high-level goalkeeper, I think it's about that time in the cycle because you don't know about Ter Stegen in the future. And I had mentioned that Diogo Costa would be my pick just as a shot stopper. With the ball at his feet, he's not Ter Stegen, but again, nobody is. But I think you picked another one of those three. It's interesting because all three of them are different, right? Like different profiles and different options as well.
They are, yeah. I think I picked Chevalier. I think he is probably, with keepers, it's always, I don't know how you sort of assess keepers accurately. You have great shot stoppers, you have players who are great with the ball at their feet. For me, a very important thing is personality. I think the intangibles for keepers as well really matter. How well can you command the box? How do you come out of your goal? Just how imposing are you? And I think Charlie is very imposing. Diego Costa too. I think both of them would be good in that way. With Valles, it's interesting because he is definitely the cheapest one. Probably going to be able to sign him for free, or even in January because his situation is completely broken with Las Palmas. He hasn't even playing regularly, so he would be the closest thing you're going to get in terms of a ball playing keeper. He is very, very good with the ball at his feet. And last year he was great as a shot stopper as well. But again, the sample size isn't as vast as you'd like it to be. But then again, for that price, I think he is worth signing. Maybe just as a backup if you want to move.
How is Valles not Pinto, right? Like
Yeah,
I think of watching
exactly,
Pinto because people don't remember. Like Pinto was signed to back up Valdez because he was a starter at Celta de Vigo. He was one of the best keepers in the Liga, right? Like Pinto wasn't just like a fun DJ who was brought in as like you know what I mean? Like he was the starting keeper of Celta de Vigo, and he was bought to be the backup to Valdez. But he was also again a very high level keeper, and Valles just pound for pound reminds me of Pinto in every way, with the exception of like again, Pinto was so much more fun, but that's the point.
Yeah. No, I completely. He's not going to be the kind of signing you're going to get. He's going to be your keeper for the next 10 years. I think he is more that sort of reliable backup kind of mode. And in terms, I think Cavalier is a very good option for us. It'd be crazy if Barcelona want to go all out. Well, all out in a way where you want to get the keeper that's good for the short term or even medium or long term. I think Emi Martinez could be a crazy shot. I think the fan base would go crazy for that. And it is a very Laporta kind of signing because in terms of keepers, if you're talking about who has the biggest name, it would be him, right? You bring him in, fan base goes crazy, especially with the Messi association as well, Argentine. That'd be a very bold move, but then at this stage in his career, it's not going to be. It could be medium term because he's not slowing down. He's probably coming into it. He's a late bloomer in a way. You could probably get 4 or 5 good seasons out of him still. So I'd be down for that personally. It depends on the price. I don't think Villa would let him go first of all. It would be insane amounts of money, but. Yeah, it could be a bold, sort of interesting signing because in terms of personality, I don't think any keeper has more sort of personality than him as well.
Well, I think Cavalier is the right pick because I did compare him in his season with Leo. He's 20 again. He's only 23. I compared that with Ter Stegen's season at Borussia Mönchengladbach, and that is kind of the comparison of a player that I'm seeing. So I think he's the right pick because I think he fits the timeline. I think, again, he becomes a starter. at 23. He goes from Lille. Barcelona's a fair level, and the numbers all align. So, gosh, you've had some good arguments, Neal. So I think the final question really to ask here is that big idea. I mean, we've been talking about a lot. So many of the names we mentioned really are June, except for the Lyon guys. But as I've said, I don't think January is going to be a signing window for the club because of the 1-to-1, unless like money shows up. But it doesn't seem to be the way. But the worry for the club right now is that they seem to be lacking a bit of depth in certain spots in the squad, and that's why the last show I just did last week with Domagoy was how if there are 7 players in that 11 that I mentioned that if they go down for 2 months or 3 months, Barcelona are in trouble, right? So the squad does need depth in January, true, but also in the big picture, if they can't afford in January and they get back to the 1-to-1, the big names we're talking about, like, would you rather forego not spending money in January at all, even if you could, and then signing Rafael Leão? I'm not trying to answer your question because people are asking you who would you spend 150 on, but I guess after our conversation, my answer to that would be Rafael Leão and Chevalier. So I've kind of changed my tune on that. So if I had 150 million, those are the 2 names I'm going with after our conversations. But so that's like one question. That's a fun question, but it's also like we didn't really mention many lack of, any depth signings for January, but that's because I don't think the club can spend on that. And that's just going to be like a problem that Barcelona have to deal with.
I think the depth argument is very important because Hansi Flick's system is so demanding. It's week in, week out. We know the system works. We know it is very potent. We know we score a lot of goals. But to sustain that for 60 games a season in this fixture list with the amount of players we have, the youngsters as well, people talk about it, they are good enough. We know that. But players like Costa, first pro season, Yamal 17, Kubasi's played so many minutes. Almost body is reliable. Pedri is reliable. Reliable. When I say reliable, I mean in terms of their fitness, of course. And then you have Gavi coming back from the ACL injury. The question becomes, can you sustain this for 60 games a season? And personally, I think the biggest concern for us is finding a way to be able to rotate. Because so far, every time we've rotated, we rested Yamal, we lost. We rested players against Austria, we lost. It's going to be difficult to find the balance between rotation and winning games because the second string 11, like you talk about Balde, his backup is Jared Martin. Koundé has Hector Fort. Hector Fort, I think, is a great prospect, Martin less so, but they're not ready to play at this level, at least consistently. Fort, you could get away with. Martin, I don't think so. Lamine Yamal, you've got no one left. So if I could go with a bit of depth signings, I would say 2 things. First is a versatile fullback who can ideally cover both positions. Now, I will say Ana Martinez, ex-La Masia, captain for Girona right now. He can play right centre-back, left-back, right-back. Very versatile, gives you consistent performances, won't cost too much. I think that's a good option, firstly, as a fullback who can operate on both backs. Second is our good old friend Oscar Mingueza. I think he's been tremendous for Celta Vigo. People talk about Mingueza, and we saw in Barcelona, he wasn't the player we needed him to be. But, he's really gone to Celta and reinvented himself in a lot of ways. I still don't think he's starting forward. He's not going to come in. But we do have a very affordable buyback clause, I believe. It's not set it too much. You bring him back in, he can play left back, left wing back, right wing back. Very good with the ball at his feet. Gives you a similar sort of presence to Koundé. Obviously not as defensively astute, but I think he could be a good option as well if we can get the money together in January. And then the last thing I think we lack is we don't need a defensive midfielder, but I do think there is space for a more physical midfielder. Casado gives you a lot of energy, gives you a lot of physicality. Gavi also. But I mean in terms of a more imposing presence, someone who's going to be a very specialist profile. You think of João Paulino at Bayern or Amadou Onana at Aston Villa. I'm talking about that kind of player. It's not a priority. I'm not going to say we need to sign that player, but if you can get someone like there's this kid at Las Palmas. I think his name is Diario Sego, I think.
Mm-hmm.
My pronunciation is probably all over the place. My Portuguese isn't good, but he is incredibly physical. He's on loan right now, but he's incredibly physical, very good with the ball at his feet. He's been one of my favorite midfielders to watch in La Liga this season. Just the way he plays, and it's not that he's limiting in the way that he's only going to give you root physicality, because he's very, very good with the ball at his feet as well, and he wouldn't cost too much money as well. So I think that's the kind of mold that I'm looking at in terms of depth, because that is what you need. Different profiles who can add to the squad in a way that don't break the bank, but also come in and elevate the floor of this squad. Because I think the ceiling is great. Fully fit, we can go toe to toe with anyone. Bayern or Madrid, yep. We've done so. But you need to find ways to elevate that floor, and the way you can do that is by signing sustainably, economically, but also getting the right profiles in, right age profiles. So that's probably what I'll do in terms of depth. But like you said, it's probably unrealistic in January. Maybe look towards building more sustainably in the summer. And I hope we don't get carried away with just breaking the bank on the 150 million, like you said, going with Leão, Chevalier. Those are great signings, great ceiling raisers, but you also can't forget about the fullback situation. Maybe a bit of depth in the midfield, someone for Lamine Yamal, someone more low cost maybe. So a good squad has the balance between those ceiling raisers and also the floor boosters, and I think that's what we have to find in the short term.
Well, I do think that again, I'll be keeping an eye now on Barca Athletic now that Aziz Issa and Adoro have showed up, because when I talk about left back, Adoro, of what I've seen so far, I mean, why not, right? Same with Hector Fort in his development this season. Why not? Same thing with Tony Fernandez. Why not? Guy Fernandez. Why not? I mean, again, there are 4 or 5 players in La Masia right now that can solve depth problems potentially next season. So that I'm looking ahead to that. As far as where people can find you and look for you, Neal, I think, again, most of the people who are listening this or watching this are aware where they can find you on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, what do you have cooking? And I mean, I'm excited. I've heard some rumors about content and you, and I'm excited to support those missions coming up.
Yeah, I was fully set on launching my own YouTube channel. I've got the graphics, everything. I haven't got into this, and I feel like this might be a good way just to say, for a minute or two, talk about what actually happened. Mate, honestly, I don't have the time, obviously, to do my own editing and find that. And living in Australia, you don't know many people who can do that. And I was having background conversations with editors, and it was so difficult. It was so difficult to get the time schedules working. At people in India and America and England, and it's very difficult to sort of corroborate an idea of how you want a video edited on the phone or on text. And people don't have the time, and I don't have the money to spend to hire someone who's very professional. So it was just a very big headache, and I think that sort of, I would say, the morale went down after that. But now I have found the right people. I think I know how to make this happen. And in 2025, I think YouTube is probably the next goal. So for anyone listening, I think you might find a Neal Gardner YouTube channel in 2025. And that is the goal, at least. So hopefully we can get that done.
I mean, and right, when you get that started, we know that there's collaborations to be happening. So that's kind of stuff is always helpful to get you kickstarted. So again, to find him, you can find him down in the show notes or the description. Again, if you are watching or listening to this, to help me as well, you see I've actually got a new shirt that I just got in the mail, Hola Culés. I had the old one from Frances, but he's still here on the podcast. I got the shirt. That's the merch store. That's the best way to help the show, just independently. And then on Patreon, you can listen to these shows without the ads for as low as $3. Then, of course, the watch alongs here on Big Up, a big help as well to join membership and just join me and sit with me during the watch alongs, during the matches. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram as well, close Facebook group, Discord. And of course, just subscribing to the YouTube channel or giving a good rating on the podcast apps. Those are the easiest, quickest, and freest way to help the show as well. So thanks so much for listening to the show. As always, until next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barca.